had bragged about my wild past, and he got revenge in front of everyone. My name is Emma, and I'm 27 years old. I work as a massage therapist. I used to live with Dave, my husband, before he threw me out, but now I stay with my snobbish aunt, who cares nothing for me. As my parents and siblings want absolutely nothing to do with me, I really, really need your help, guys. I'm in deep trouble, and I don't know what to do at all. Dave, my husband, whom I've been married to for 5 years, decided to call it quits with me. It would be less painful if that was just all it was. But Dave had announced he was quitting our marriage on our 5th-year anniversary, in front of everyone we invited to celebrate with us, including our families. Dave had called it quits with me in the worst way possible. It was the most horrible thing he could have done to me, really, and he threw me out after abruptly ending the party with the promise of sending me the divorce papers as soon as he could get his hands on them. I met Dave through his cousin Sheila, who was a friend of mine way back in university. But we didn't immediately start dating. We maintained being friends for over 3 years before we started dating at all. Dave had come visiting her when we had met and had exchanged contacts, but back then I wasn't interested in him at all, though he showed interest in me even back then. I liked bad guys, the usual guys that girls would always want to be seen with and be envied because they won the bad boy's heart. Dave was cool and he was very brilliant. He had one of the best results graduating as an engineering student and was quite popular amongst his own people, but I just did not fancy him at that point. He was very handsome but did not have any bad strings in him, which, at that point, turned me off. I lived a really wild life back in university. Even way before university, my parents had to come pick me up at police stations. At the tender age of 15, I was really wild back then. I did drugs like it was no man's business. I was the prodigal child of the family because, in my family of 5, I have 2 older sisters. I was the only one with bad records. I even flunked my exams for my final year and had to retake them to enter into the university I attended. My sisters were the good ones. They were examples of the prim and proper kids raised by perfect parents. I hated them because of how they made it look so easy to be good when it wasn't. I had several times been compared to my sisters growing up, and that just made my behavior worse because I rebelled even worse than I did before. I lost my virginity when I was just 16, and it had been behind the park in our town. Ever since, I have had sex freely, not wanting to be tied to a particular person or being known as being in a committed relationship. The crowd I hung out with were children in the town that thought little to nothing about schooling, so it made it easier for me to just not care about schoolwork. My parents had made a deal to get me to try out for a university, and I had agreed with the intention that I could get my own space and freedom to do whatever I wanted. I made sure to choose the one far away from home and from my sisters, so I wouldn't be monitored as I was at home. Luckily for me, I was able to do so when I got my admission. I was so happy, and it wasn't long before I started mixing with the bad crowd again. I once got suspended from school because I was caught with drugs in the library, but I had avoided big punishment by lying that I had been framed. Luckily, there had been no CCTV around, so it was easier to follow through with my story. They eventually believed me, but they suspended me, and my parents found out because the school authorities had reached out to them. My parents, knowing what I was capable of, or they thought they did, put me in a rehabilitation group that usually gathered in attics and talked through ways of getting through it. It was so boring that I stopped going after a week. And I kept leaving the house not to go to the rehab meetings, but to go get high. I kept on with my wild ways until I was in the final year of school. I had almost gotten myself into big trouble, and I would probably be in jail now for murder. I had met this guy, Caleb. We had met at our mini joints where my friends and I go to just get some drugs into our system, and he had also been there for the same thing. He had flirted seriously with me, and after 30 minutes of meeting, I was having sex with him. We met up after that day and we started this whole friendship thing. He introduced me to his friends who were drug dealers like him, and because of the sexual relationship between us, he kept giving me drugs for free. This had continued for a month before Caleb started to get all aggressive and bitter, especially when he saw me with other guys. He would threaten to beat them up unless I stayed away. But I had thought it was a joke until he really did it. The boy had been a newbie and had just been asking for directions, but to Caleb, it must have felt like I was flirting with him because he had just come out of nowhere and beaten up the boy so brutally. I was so pissed and did not want to speak to him any longer, But he was the one supplying me drugs for free, so I couldn't stay away for long. Caleb and I eventually became official after 3 months of sleeping with each other and doing stuff normal couples wouldn't even do. Although we laid down some rules, we were allowed other sex partners, especially at a party, and we also said we wouldn't get all possessive whenever we were with other partners. He had agreed to all of the rules but didn't keep them. He did keep one, which was having several other sex partners. He claimed to be business partners with them, but he wouldn't allow me to do the same. He went behind my back to threaten any male figure around me, and I eventually got tired of him and his crazy antics, so I called it quits with him. But Caleb had not accepted that we were broken up. He let me be for a while until he noticed I started hanging out with Derek. Derek was in a different gang from Caleb, and I chose to be with him because he was the only one who could challenge Caleb. Any other guy was apparently a wimp around Caleb. They both dealt drugs and were sworn enemies because of how often they clashed, especially over clients. When Caleb found out I was with Derek, he got angry and came to warn me, but I hadn't listened. Well, until Caleb had almost killed Derek. When he didn't succeed, he had implicated Derek and exposed him to the law. Derek and his accomplices had been arrested and were charged. Luckily, I had been able to get away because Derek, for some reason, had refused to name me as one of his accomplices. But I was so scared, and I stayed off campus for a while, trying to avoid Caleb just in case he decided to implicate me too. I remember that I had sworn to steer clear of bad boys if I could get out of that situation unharmed, and I did. So I kept my promise. Of course, it was hard because I was used to that life, so it wasn't exactly easy to quit. But Dave had come in at that point. I lived with him after my graduation from school because I did not want to have to go back to my parents' house. I had studied business because of my parents, but knowing my parents, they would probably want one of my sisters to help me get a stable paying job, and I did not want to have to deal with the 9-to-5 issue. So, when I had told Dave about my reluctance to go home, he had invited me to stay with him and that I may pay rent if I didn't feel comfortable enough to stay for free. After I voiced my concerns, Dave had been really cool to live with. He was calm and gentle and sometimes shy, especially around me. I was very vulgar, perhaps because of my past, and so sometimes when I said some things, the way his eyes would widen, and he would quickly try changing the topic. I always found it cute. Dave was the one who encouraged me when I told him I wanted to become a massage therapist. He even paid for the classes so I could get my license, and he allowed the use of his body as my practice when I learned something new. Most times, soon enough, I got my certificate and I wanted to open up a mini shop for it. But I had no money, and I felt too indebted to Dave to again accept his help to help me get it, so I refused his help and chose to get the money on my own. On my own, I was able to raise half the money. By then, Dave and I had started dating, and it was really amazing. He was a real gentleman and was always trying hard to please me. He was cute compared to my last 2 relationships. He was easily the best. Although I missed the rough life of sex and drugs, together it was hard not to miss it. It was hard staying off drugs, and the only way I had ever truly enjoyed sex was when I was high on drugs. It was just thrilling. Even though sex with Dave was quite okay, he was pretty shy too when we first started having sex because I apparently was his first. I usually wondered just how he had fun back in university. No girlfriends, no drugs, no sex, just books and a clean record. Anyway, I refused for Dave to pay for my shop unless I had some contributions to it, so I worked part-time at an already established company. We would sometimes be hired to go for home services, or sometimes to a resort or some hotel to attend to our customers. Funnily, most customers that chose me were usually men. The customers are allowed to choose which attendant they want to attend to them. Soon enough, I became the envy of the other girls, and I didn't mind because I didn't even speak to them. I flirted with the men easily, and at the end, they gave me huge tips and some tempting offers to meet in a casual setting. I would stylishly inform them that I'd rather they come to me when I opened up my own shop. This continued for some months, just until even my boss started to feel threatened by me. One of the men that was a regular at the company and who usually asked specifically for my boss suddenly requested my services instead. Rumors had it that he was the one sponsoring the company, and the boss aimed to please him in every aspect, even sexually. So, when he had requested me, she had no choice but to let me attend to him. Since I was good at my job, the man had given the highest amount I have ever seen as a tip. When he had asked if I could meet up with him at some other place, I had suggested my shop as usual, and he had offered to give me the money required to get everything I needed to get a standard place with all the equipment in place. I had been so shocked when he offered that I just laughed it off. He kept coming back and would request me personally every time he did. One time he had come on my day off. I had been told he asked to see my schedule so he could come back when I was in. My boss started to get really irritated with me and would just find some flimsy reasons to talk to me. It annoyed me because I was not even the one at fault. One day, the man came in as usual, and he had met my boss scolding me when we were alone. He had asked what had happened, and I had just told him the truth. He had then offered again to give me the money to pay for my own space, since I had my certificate and all that was necessary to start up. He had then gotten my account details to show how serious he was and had sent me money almost immediately, asking that whatever the remaining cost was, I should let him know. I had been really excited, but I knew I couldn't tell Dave I wasn't sleeping with the man or anything like that. I just felt Dave was a little too conservative and would probably think I was. He didn't even believe in flirting when you were in a committed relationship. I felt choked sometimes because of how he took this commitment in a relationship rather seriously. I started a shop at a haunt, and I got the perfect center place for my business. Somehow, greedily, I wanted to keep the money for myself. So when I got the estimated amount needed to rent and also get the necessary equipment, I told the man about it, and he had sent the money immediately without hesitation. I also told Dave that I wanted to stop working and that I had gotten some money for half the price of the shop. He had given me the remaining money and also provided some necessary equipment that I'd like to get. I was so happy because it meant I got to keep a considerable amount of the money to myself. I got everything needed and opened up my business. Since I had the personal contact information of the company I worked with before, I called them to invite them specially to my own space. Before long, business was booming, and I had to employ some workers, particularly male. I didn't want what happened to my boss to occur to me. I wanted to be the only one special around my own space. Within a year of opening up my business, my former company had shut down, and I did celebrate with a glass of champagne. Call me bad, but I liked that she knew she messed with the wrong person. The man who gave me money for my business started to pester me for sex, and I knew I had to sleep with him not to lose him. I knew it would hurt my relationship with Dave, but I thought that what he didn't know didn't have the power to hurt him, so I made sure he did not suspect a thing. By then, Dave and I were together for 2 years already, and on our second anniversary of being together, he proposed to me in front of our families and friends. I was so happy and had gladly said yes. Within 2 months, we were married. And it really pleased my parents seeing that I ended up with a good man despite my unruly behavior growing up. I was happy too that I ended up marrying Dave, but it wasn't long before the trouble started. Dave wanted kids immediately after our wedding, and I refused. I knew I couldn't have kids yet because I had to look sexy to attract and keep my customers. I was too addicted to seeing loads of funds in my bank account to quit the lifestyle I had. I had different clothes from the biggest brands you could name. My shoes were custom-made, and my car was even a gift from one of my clients who sold cars. My lifestyle was too addicting to stop, and kids were definitely a threat to that because it meant I had to automatically take a seat back for 2 years for the duration of the pregnancy and also the breastfeeding journey and all that. Then again, my body may not even go back to its shape in another year. I couldn't afford to do that, so I kept arguing with Dave that we were newlyweds and we should enjoy our space without kids in it for a year or so. A year passed, and it felt like Dave had been ticking it off his calendar because he started to pester me again about kids. I was able to put it off another year, but then, in the 3rd year, I knew I had to do something else because it would definitely make Dave suspect me. So, I had agreed to having kids, but whenever we did have sex without protection, I took medications to prevent pregnancy, and I took birth control pills secretly to avoid getting pregnant. Dave was so worried at the end of the 3rd year when we didn't have kids that he had insisted we go to a fertility clinic, and I agreed to it. We had been tested, and we were completely fertile enough to have kids, which relaxed Dave a little bit. By this time, I was sleeping with 4 to 5 of my clients without each of them knowing, including my husband, who didn't even know about the men at all. It wasn't because I enjoyed doing so, but because I couldn't refuse them when they gave me so much money, and I had to give them sex in return for their financial assistance. It was more like a business transaction to me, really. I exchanged sex for money, and it was fair to me. I offered them pleasurable sex, and they offered me pleasurable money. Sleeping with them made my skin crawl most times. I had to fake orgasm just to make them feel good. They didn't know how to touch or pleasure a woman. I always wondered why their wives were still married to them. I wasn't exactly surprised, though. Most of them were in their 50s, so it was no bother if they knew how to have sex or not, as long as I got my reward from it. In our 4th year of marriage, Dave and I attended a party at his company. Dave had recently received a Best Engineering Award, and they had organized a celebration for him. As his supporting wife, I had to be there, but the party bored me out of my mind. I didn't understand most of the discussions they had, so I just smiled when Dave looked at me to ensure I was fine. I continued sipping my champagne, careful not to drink too fast and get drunk. Dave eventually excused himself from our table to meet his boss, leaving me alone. I was indulging in my own antics when my phone beeped. It was from one of the men I had slept with. He sent me a nude picture of his erect male genitals, saying his mic missed me. Yes, he named his male genital organ. I just rolled my eyes and replied with a flirty comment to please him, then deleted the conversation. When a man named Sam sat beside me, smiling, he introduced himself and straightforwardly told me that he liked me. I didn't particularly like him. He wasn't nearly as handsome as Dave. However, I could tell from his appearance that he was rich. So, I discreetly flirted with him, careful not to make it obvious to onlookers. It was still my husband's party, and I couldn't exactly flirt outrageously with someone else while he was there. I loved Dave so much and always wanted to find him looking at me with that twinkle in his eyes. It made me feel at home and less dirty than I actually was. To Dave, I was like an angel, and I always wanted to be that for him. I handed him my business card so he could reach out to me and then spent the rest of the party alone, but his eyes never left me. I pretended not to notice and focused on my husband. Through the rest of the party, it was a week before he contacted me and booked a massage session with me for a whole day. I don't know how I was supposed to massage him for a whole day, but he paid heavily for the session, so who was I to oppose? He had booked a private session, so I had to go to him. He had given me the address of where it was, and it had turned out to be one of the largest hotels around town. So I had gone there. When I got there, he had ordered food for us and insisted I eat with him, as he didn't enjoy eating alone. I knew that was probably a lie, but I didn't tell him, and I joined him soon after. He allowed me to work my magic on his body, and I did the massage for about 2 hours before he asked me to stop, to take a break with him. He had ordered a drink to be brought up into his room, and it had been delivered quickly. He helped himself to 1 cup, clearly expecting me to join him, and I did. Then he brought out something from one of his cases, lying recklessly on his bed. It turned out to be drugs, and the sight of the drugs immediately made my body react. He had asked if I did drugs, and I had lied that I didn't. So, he helped himself to some, and I was so tempted watching him get high. I did not know how, but somehow I had sat beside him and was sniffing with him, and he had passed me the drugs to help myself to. Before long, I was so high and happy, and when he started kissing me, I was already so horny, and I just went along with it. I did not have to fake an orgasm that day because the drugs themselves made me extremely horny, and any small touch would give me a mighty orgasm, one that a 4-hour sex session couldn't. Sam and I kept seeing each other a lot after that day because of the drugs he gave me and because he wanted sex in return. Several times, I turned down the offer of the other men I was seeing just to go see Sam and get high. One time, I had even forgotten that Dave's parents were visiting, and he had begged me to prepare dinner for them since he would pick them up from the airport and bring them home. I had agreed, but earlier that day I had gone to see Sam and we did our usual. I had slept off heavily after the whole thing, and by the time I woke up, it was midnight. I had to lie that a worker of mine had fainted at work, and I had to stay with her at the hospital because her family was far away. When Dave had asked why I didn't pick my calls when he had called several times, I had lied again that I had panicked when she had fainted, and I had left my phone back at the shop in my haste to get her to the hospital. Dave had believed me and even offered to come with me the next day to the hospital, but I had refused with excuses. Everything went on well, and I was glad Dave did not suspect anything at all. We were a happy couple, and even our friends envied our relationship. I knew I was the one who needed to stop what I was doing, but I just couldn't. Funnily, it was not that I was addicted to doing drugs again. Sometimes Sam and I just got together to have sex. But I just liked how our sex was rough and hard, especially when Sam was on drugs, which was most of the time. Sometimes I didn't even do drugs with him, especially when I had to leave there early to avoid suspicion. Just watching him do drugs made me horny, and that usually made our sex really explosive. One time I had been robbed in my shop, but luckily for me, the police caught the robber making away with other people's money because of their CCTV camera. Dave had insisted on installing a CCTV camera in my shop, but I had refused, saying it felt like I was being watched. It was true, though. Most times I slept with my clients right inside my shop, so if a CCTV was installed, I would be exposed. Even Sam started to come around, mostly to my shop to get a massage, when truly all we did was have sex and do drugs. My shop was soundproofed, so there was no way my workers could hear all my sex escapades with my clients, and they knew better than to interrupt us during a session. Well, I guess you never could get away with everything. You truly cannot have your cake and eat it. I did myself really bad. I was the cause of everything that really happened. Whenever Dave and I talked, especially about our past, I usually bragged about my wild past. Dave had nothing of that sort, so it was easy to just make him feel like he was inferior, as he didn't have the experience I had. I would tell him just how popular the guys I was with in school were and how I was just so popular and not easy to mess with. I would even dare to hint at my present affairs just to brag, but I was usually careful to make use of past tense when talking. Dave would just silently watch me while I bragged and called him a nerd or a boring guy. Well, I guess you cannot go looking for a snake's trouble without getting bitten, because Dave gave me the biggest surprise of all. Looking back now to that day, there was nothing absolutely suspicious about what he had in mind, and he never behaved out of place, or maybe he did and I didn't notice. It had been our 5th-year anniversary, and Dave wanted to celebrate this time in grand style. He decided that we would host a party and invited everyone over. He even paid for our parents' flight tickets and arranged everything for that day. I didn't even have to do anything, and I felt lucky, especially when my friends, who had traveled down with all expenses paid, told me how jealous they were of my relationship and how perfect my husband was. Pleased me to no end hearing them say that, and I even bragged about how much he loved me. We hung out with our families and friends prior to the day of the party because we had a lot of catching up to do. My mom had even asked me why we weren't discussing children yet, and I had told her we were trying for one, and she had been satisfied with my response. It was obvious she was proud of the choice I made in marrying Dave. She obviously felt that I changed from being a prodigal child to a useful one after meeting Dave. Even my sisters, who were equally married and came with their spouses, told me the same. In the evening, when we all hung out by the pool, Dave rented a projector. My friends kept talking about how amazing my husband was, and I had them bragging again in front of Dave about how wild my past was and how surprising it was that I settled for him. Dave had said nothing, and I really didn't make any meaning of it. Well, guess he did, because he did something really brutal on the D-Day. That horrible day. Dave had started off the day by giving me breakfast in bed. We had even made love that morning. He had a dress that he wanted me to wear delivered for me, with a matching purse and shoes. He even got me earrings and a necklace worth millions. He had told me he had a big surprise for me but would only give it to me during the party. I had pestered him all day to hint at it, but he refused to say anything, just smiled and said I would find out soon. The evening came, and the party started normally, just until Dave decided he wanted to give me a surprise. I was even stupidly excited. He had brought in a projector and then began to play a video, not one but 4 short videos. But they were of me having sex in my so-called massage sessions with my clients. The most horrible one had been the one with Sam when we were both doing drugs and then started having a kind of BDSM sex thing. He was spanking me, and I was begging him to stop while moaning in pleasure. I was so shocked and couldn't even move from that spot when I turned. My mom was the first to reach me, and she just slapped me right across the face and told me she wanted nothing to do with me. She was led out by my dad and followed by my sisters, who gave me looks of disgust. Even my friends left, and Dave's mom spat at me before leaving. I was left alone with my sex video on replay. Apparently, Dave had secretly installed a CCTV camera for my safety but had found me doing something else instead. He had been the last to leave, and it was just to tell me he wanted nothing to do with me anymore. He wanted me to get out of his house by dawn. I'm so doomed, guys. I really, desperately need some advice on how to get back with my husband. I truly love Dave, and I cannot lose him, please. Update. Has anyone ever felt like you have become so useless and worthless to everyone, yourself included? Well, that's how I feel right now. I feel so abandoned and alone, like I have never felt in my entire life. I never thought it possible for one to feel this horrible and miserable. The worst thing is that the pain just never goes away. I'm so ruined. My shop has closed down because, apparently, a wife of one of the clients I frolicked around with had found out about her husband's affair. She exposed me to the world as her husband's mistress through fake messages, and everyone started to spread rumors about my shop. Within 2 weeks, I had no customers. I wasn't even freaked by it because that was not what bothered me the most. I lost Dave. Dave wants me to sign our divorce papers, and I'm so scared because that finalizes the whole thing. I still want to hold on desperately to him, despite knowing I have no right. I feel so ashamed of myself. My parents and my siblings want nothing to do with me. They feel ashamed to be related to me at the moment, and I do not even blame them at all. Even I myself would regret being related to me right now. I feel so stupid, and now the reasons I did everything feel very worthless and not even reason enough. I regret ever hurting Dave that much. He loved me, and he never stopped showing me just how much he did love me. But I took him for granted. I even bragged about my affairs right to his face. I feel like the stupidest person on earth right now. Everything feels so blank. I've never felt this bad before. I cannot even do anything but stare at my aunt's old ceiling and cry my eyes out. It doesn't even help that she just yells for me to stop disturbing her sleeping every night with my silly cries. I hate myself so much. I hate myself so much right now. I regret everything I did. Dave was the best man for me, and yet I stupidly lost him. My life without Dave is so empty and painful. Everything keeps failing because I have no Dave in my life. Looking back, I actually achieved a lot only with Dave. I had a stable relationship, then a loving marriage, and even a shop and families too. But now I have nothing because I have no Dave. This hurts so much. It hurts so badly. I cannot even explain how much it hurts right now. It's all my fault. You guys don't even make it better. You make me feel like I'm worse than a dog. I came here seeking help, but you guys gave me none of that, but instead, insults and made me feel worse than I already do. I know even now that this post will probably receive as much hate as the last one I made, but sadly, I have no one else to talk to. Loneliness is real. Update. It's me again. Just wanted to say that this is probably my last post. I don't feel better. Time doesn't heal anything. It just makes everything worse than it already is. I still feel as horrible as I felt the first day. Dave has officially been set free from a monster like me. He's free from an adulterous wife, but sadly, I'm not free from myself. I'm stuck in the hell of my own making. I cannot break free from the bondage I created for myself. It's so hard because I'm still stuck in the past. I was forever happy, and after that, I destroyed it with my own hands over nothing. Stupid me. I desperately wish I had never done all I did. I should have just been a contented wife. I wonder now if I had agreed to have kids with Dave, perhaps things would be slightly different for us now. Perhaps he'd consider our child and not abandon me totally. Well, I guess I'll never get to find out now. I lost the chance. Regret is probably not enough words to encompass what I feel now. If wishes were horses, I guess horses would fly, truly, because I wish for a lot of things right now that I can possibly never have again in my life. I'm stuck. I'm stuck here forever in this really painful today that seems to just keep going around in circles with no intention of taking a break. Forever ending. I know I will forever pay for hurting Dave so much. I guess even an eternity of feeling like this might not be enough to even take away the hurt. I sure hope that regardless of how much you guys hate me, you won't repeat my mistakes. I will tell you for free that I wish desperately that I wasn't stuck here right now. Thanks and goodbye.